Let's go! Which game on LSU schedule is the hardest and the trickiest? Those things are two different questions, and today we're going to answer both of those. I'm going to need your help in the comment section today, and as you can tell, I am under the weather. So no live streams. Had a crazy last couple of weeks. I really appreciate a lot of you for congratulating me on what was a huge day. More on that in just a second. Boom! Looking at you right now. So you are now looking at the LSU schedule, and I'm going to let you come to your own conclusion before answering this question. Which is LSU's toughest game and which is the sleeper, the trickiest games? Two completely different things. And as you come to your conclusion, one really funny thing about when the schedule was released, a lot of people thought LSU was playing Georgia next year. They are not. They are playing Grambling in week 2. So let's clear up any confusion. This rumor got spread. So once again, you're looking at the schedule, and if your guess was Alabama, I would disagree with you. I think LSU's toughest game is going to be Florida State with everything that they returned. This is the most hyped they have been. And, of course, they will basically be playing a home game on September 3rd. But the one thing that's very interesting, I think it is close between Florida State and Alabama. The reason why I give the nod to Florida State, even though Alabama is a true road game, is Alabama has actually lost more talent than anybody else in the SEC, which is absolutely insane. And, of course, Alabama is replacing not one but two coordinators and the best quarterback ever under Nick Saban. And I've done a lot of deep dives on Power Hour SEC. You can watch them in the top right corner of your screen. I've done a lot of content showing that Nick Saban's actual coaching has slipped. I think a lot of you remember the, I'm not going to say idiotic decision to go for 2 when they were up by 3, but that was a hideous coaching mistake. He made quite a few of them last year in my estimation. So, I'm not saying Nick Saban's lost it. He just brought in arguably his best recruiting class ever, but there is a lot that needs to get fixed in Tuscaloosa. Plus, we have no issue getting up for the Alabama game. We have a cupcake game versus Army the week before a bye week. So I think the Alabama game is probably a little bit overvalued, and this is going to be Nick Saban's worst team in quite some time. Whereas Florida State, this team is one of the leaders in returning talent, and they return probably the best bet, in my estimation, to win the Heisman next year, according to the odds. I really like the Jordan Travis play, and last year, I think his game versus LSU was probably the best he had all season, and they returned everybody. It kind of reminds me of the 07 LSU team. They had a lot of guys make that decision to come back. So without further ado, this man and his team will be the trickiest game and a losable game on LSU schedule, despite them arguably having the lowest recruiting rankings out of any team on our SEC slate. So that is pretty nuts, but there is a lot of data that backs up LSU potentially getting upset in this. Before we get into it, I want to shout out our latest Patreon, Donovan. Really, the funniest Don R since this man, and I could use a laugh right about now. Let's talk about this Missouri game. It's going to be hard for a lot of different reasons that really has nothing to do with LSU at all. So right now you're getting a little bit of a behind the scenes look at how I outline my videos. As you can see, my handwriting is absolutely glorious, and yeah, so all these reasons, we're going to explain them all today, and yeah, this is really, really concerning me. So the first thing is you're looking at, once again, this tweet we showed you a little bit earlier from Connor O'Gara, and this is ripped from ESPN's Bill Connolly on returning talent. Now, remember, you saw a minute ago, Alabama has the least returning talent, as does Florida and Arkansas. So a lot of the teams on LSU's schedule next year lost a lot. Texas A&M didn't. I know a lot of people would say this could be the biggest trap game, but we are definitely going to be fired up and focused. We have a cupcake before that game. We're also at home. They were overvalued. And once again, if you are a subscriber on Power Hour SEC, I was correct on every over-under that I played last year, okay? So I take the over-unders very seriously. Sometimes I'm wrong, but I'm going to give you a little bit of a background on my over-unders from last year. The team that I actually liked the most was Missouri at 5.5. There was a lot of reasons as to why, and honestly, they were even better than their 6-6 record indicated because they almost beat Georgia. In fact, they should have beaten Georgia, and their loss to Auburn was the luckiest win I have ever seen from Auburn. Mizzou missed a game-winning chip shot field goal, and their running back fumbled the ball through the back of the end zone in overtime to win the game. So really, and I know we do a lot of this woulda, coulda, shoulda stuff, Missouri should have won at least one of those games. So in actuality, they're probably a 7-ish win team. So Eli Drinkowitz, obviously a very solid coach, and I want you to see this other stat right here, and this is from Bill Connolly as well. The last one was Bill Connolly. We're going to show you this one as well. According to Bill Connolly's metrics, no team in the SEC with what they return has the highest improvement rating better than Missouri. Now you're looking at the QBRs of Connor Cook. I say Connor Cook. Brady Cook, not Connor Cook. He was a Michigan State quarterback. But Brady Cook was a guy who got better as the season moved on. You're looking at all the QBRs. He finished with a QBR north of 70, I believe, except for the bowl game versus Wake Forest, and he really didn't play all that bad in this one. So this guy got better as the season moved on, and even though they lost Dominic Lovett, their best player, to Georgia in the portal, they do, once again, according to Connolly's metrics, return an absolutely lot of talent. I believe they return Cody Schrader, a very solid running back as well. So this team is just overall undervalued, and I'm probably going to hit the over again. And you take a look at Missouri's schedule. The week before they play us, they play Vanderbilt. Okay? So Vanderbilt is no run over, and that game is on the road, but it is the best SEC matchup you are going to possibly draw, right? Because even though Vandy played above expectations as well, do we really believe they're going to put together two great years in a row? So once again, I don't think Missouri is some incredible team, but I think even though Elijah Drinkowitz's records are overall very mediocre, I do think he is I'm about to cough again. I'm not going to try to. A solid coach. But now, I'm looking at you right now. We're going to get to what actually generated the most traffic ever on PHL from a deep dive, and it actually came from Tiger droppings. Kind of weird, right? And I'm going to share with you the biggest bet I played on an LSU game last year because of one stat. So a lot of you on live streams have heard me talk about the historic stat about SEC back-to-back road games. And this video was shared by somebody on Tiger Droppings. I really appreciated it. It did generate a lot of new, unique traffic to the channel. So you guys share these deep dives. It takes a lot of work. Obviously, we're powering through this together. And I got a very special, cool gesture for you right now with our friends at Underdog Fantasy. I'm so close to hitting an absolutely massive bonus. It's going to help me pay for all these flowers at this wedding that I just had. I had no idea that flowers were this expensive, but here we go. So go to Underdog Fantasy, type in the promo code Carter, and you help me out absolutely big time. And I got something really cool to show you. They do these really cool legs, and my favorite play is the over on Patrick Mahomes' rushing yardage. Underdog Fantasy, promo code Carter, get to it right now. So a lot of you know that I have an affinity for the Mississippi coaches, Mike Leach, RIP to his great Maestro Air Raid Mind, and Lane Kiffin. I love both of their offenses. And going into the LSU game this past year, Mississippi State was actually favored on the road. And that is when I maxed out LSU to win outright. Now, why did I do that? Because of 2019 LSU. I'm not going to get too deep into the numbers here, but 2019 LSU was the last team to win true back-to-back road games without bye weeks until this year when Georgia did it going back-to-back I believe it was one game versus Mississippi State and the next week versus Kentucky. So think about all the back-to-back road games that have happened over the past couple of years, and there have been a lot, and only 2 teams have walked away with back-to-back SEC Power 5 road game victories. And as you guys can see right here, this is a back-to-back road game. So this is not good if we are LSU. And then it gets into a rather controversial topic. You guys don't rip my face off. I am a little worried about JAYDEN Daniels in this spot. Now, you're looking at the Florida game. This was an absolutely phenomenal game from JAYDEN Daniels, but this was his only good road performance. Now, it was his best performance on the season. You can argue the fourth quarter versus Alabama, but from start to finish, JAYDEN Daniels dominated this game. But in all the other road games that he played, true road games on the road in the SEC, also these teams weren't necessarily the absolute best teams. He was not great, right? Auburn with a lame duck coach, we averaged 3.6 yards per play. Not great. Obviously, a lot of you remember the Arkansas game, which was probably the worst statistical game of his career. I know he had the flu, and I understand how difficult it is to do anything when you are sick, as I am sick right now. But JAYDEN, getting to know people close to him, he is not an excuse maker. It was bad, and we were very fortunate that 2 things were true in that game. Harold Perkins existed. He went out there and won the game along with the rest of our defense. And they did not have KJ Jefferson. They had abysmal quarterback play, their backups at Arkansas. Then, of course, we have the Texas A&M game where he had a very good first half. Drops really hurt him, plus a very bad defensive effort from LSU, their worst defensive game of the year. And the second half for JAYDEN Daniels was his worst half of the season, basically somewhat tossing the game away. So, on the road, JAYDEN Daniels, even going back to his days at Arizona State, he wasn't great. And that's the case for a lot of SEC teams. And this is back-to-back road games, which is very rare, right? Power 5 teams rarely have more road games than home games, so you rarely do have back-to-back road games. LSU hasn't really had one, I believe, since 2019, cut out the COVID year in 2020, where there weren't really fans in the stadium, and I just slobbered. So let's roll through the end of this. He just wasn't great, and he has got to be better on the road this season. We need more Florida type of performances, and you can make a strong case, especially with their relative talent to the other people. Let's be honest, Florida was probably the worst defense in the SEC. So we got a lot of things going our way in those games, and then it lends itself into another tricky spot here. This Mississippi State game has a high likelihood of being an 11 a.m. game as well. So JAYDEN Daniels himself has not really played a whole lot of day games going back to his days at Arizona State. We had 2 11 a.m. games last year, and you can argue those were JAYDEN's 2 worst games of the season. The Tennessee game where he made some impressive throws, but that was at home. And then, of course, the Arkansas game on the road at 11 a.m. Really solid next year. And because that is more than likely going to be a marquee matchup, that game is going to be at night. One of my favorite things about the Mississippi State game going into the LSU game was that Mississippi State game played a late game versus Arizona. They didn't get back to Starkville until 4 a.m. Once again, I didn't sleep much this past weekend. You feel like trash when you don't stay on your normal sleep cycle. Just for you to go back on a plane again 4.5 days later, and it is brutal. So there is going to be a lot of concerns for me going into this spot because, once again, the last 2 SEC teams, I believe there have been 40 instances over the past 2.5 years here. There have only been 2 teams to win back-to-back road games. The greatest team of all time and arguably the second greatest team of the modern era, LSU and Georgia. And by the way, Georgia didn't absolutely play their best versus Kentucky, and LSU defensively did not play their best versus Ole Miss. So I'm looking at you. I know you've already subscribed. Ring the bell. I gave you 1,000 different ways to support PH freaking L with Underdog, the Patreon, super thanks, Venmo, Cash App. I really appreciate it. And I do have a little extra something. You guys on Twitter. Okay, two things happened, and it was absolutely freaking hilarious. I got into a feud with my absolute best friend in LSU media, Mr. AYS himself. Now, if you guys don't take my side in this, I'm going to block each and every one of you, okay? Because he did not show up to my wedding, okay? Now, but what I want to do before I give you a few final thoughts here is so many of you flamed me for not having LSU at the top of this groom's cake, and instead I had Liverpool. But this is simple logistics and cake artistry, okay? A lot of you did not watch Cake Boss, okay? This guy would have told you that the Liverpool logo, as you could see, is very vertical, where the LSU logo is horizontal, as is the Pelicans logo. So, as you can see, I am wearing my Liverpool jacket and my PHL hat. I love both of them, but LSU is always going to be number one. So you guys can flame me all you want for my groom's cake, my peach Bellini drink that were flowing like the Sahara, Well, I'm flowing like a waterfall. But yes, now, once again, I am not anti-JAYDEN Daniels at all. In fact, fifth-year quarterbacks and quarterbacks that have gotten more experience. We saw Bo Nix, we saw Michael Penix, and we even saw JAYDEN Daniels take massive steps up in their game at their new spot. Each one of those three are coming back for another year, and all three of them should be even better. So a lot of you are going to take everything I said there at the end as anti-JAYDEN, but it's very important to point out that his road performances were not great, and a lot of them were due to really bad reads from him. There were throws open in each and every one of those games that he missed, in particular the Arkansas and Texas A&M game, and quite frankly, you have just got to be able to hit them, which is why it is good that Garrett Nussmeier is really going to push him to do that. So the simple truth is this, right? Missouri is going to be tough. I'm not saying we are going to lose, but I am pointing out that SEC football and just college football as a whole is a very difficult sport because sometimes it's not about this team versus this team, who is more talented, because obviously LSU laps Missouri when it comes to raw talent, but games are very situational. It is very important to always point out where the game is being played and when it is on the schedule. So, this isn't anti-JAYDEN stuff. This isn't really pro-Missouri stuff. But, when I do these deep dives and look at this data and trends, doesn't mean LSU is going to lose to Missouri, but it is tricky, right? It is a game that is by far the least exciting SEC game of the season. And think about the college football athlete. Think about the college football athlete himself. You could see LSU potentially laying an egg in that spot because it's hard to get up for that Missouri game. It's hard to play on the road. And we saw this a few years ago for the 2020 the 2020 game. We're going to wrap it up in the 2020 game. But, it's just hard. A lot of teams don't play their absolute best when they go to Missouri. So hopefully that will change. So comment down below. Obviously, we got plenty of time to talk about everything that's going to happen going into the next season. And of course, we don't know when the next live stream is actually going to be. So just be on the lookout for that. Hopefully, I'm fully healthy and ready to go tomorrow. I highly doubt that. So be on the lookout. I'm going to try and post as much content as I possibly can. It is Power Hour LSU. Bam. Appreciate all the Manning compliments, the wedding compliments. I really do appreciate it. Appreciate all the new patrons. Don't forget Underdog Fantasy and all that good stuff. And tonight, we, like some former LSU legends, we're going to be hitting up some of that cough syrup, baby. Let's go. Double cup. Ha, ha, ha.